article by Adon Salazar says the Army continues to cover up secret experimentation 65 years later. They've got a lawsuit that was filed 5 years ago, still dragging through the courts because the DOD and the U.S. Army are attempting to delay a court order that would force them to provide certain notice to Vietnamese veterans, disclosing the extent to which they'd been secretly used as test subjects for experimentation. Now, this lawsuit says that with the help of Nazi scientists recruited through Project Paperclip, the Army and the CIA used at least 7,800 veterans as human guinea pigs at the Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland alone. That's just at one site they used 7,800 people. And of course, these are experiments that are part of MK Ultra, Operation Bluebird, Pandora, Monarch, all these familiar terms. Anybody that knows anything about the history of the CIA, the dark history of the CIA, things that came out during the Church Committee hearings in the 1970s. And the lawsuit goes on to say that the U.S. government sought drugs to control human behavior, cause confusion, promote weakness or temporary loss of hearing and vision, and many other effects. Now, when we look at what the Japanese government did and what they're being criticized for by the Chinese, that they would build a monument to honor war criminals, what did the U.S. do? We built a bureaucracy so that they could continue with their criminal behavior, continue with their experimentation on other humans. But this time they were experimenting on American soldiers, college volunteers, and of course, prisoners that we have here in the United States. And we have more than any other country. But the experimentation continues. Now it's taking the form of another criminal bureaucracy, Homeland Security. And we see that Major League Baseball is playing ball with them, just like the NFL. Major League Baseball is preparing new DHS screening measures at all ballparks, writes Mikhail Phelan. He says that they just tested some of these last year, and the baseball representative is very excited. He says, we conducted testing of these measures at the All-Star game and at both World Series venues last year, and we were pleased that it was effective and received without issue from the fans. That's right, they just passively went along with the new control techniques like good servants who've been confused and had their behavior modified. This is nothing but operant conditioning behavior, straight from Skinner. They start at the airports and then they go to the ball games because they know that when you're ready to travel, they can give you a nice reward if you behave the way they want you to. It's nice, positive operant conditioning. And they do the same thing now at all major league sports. They're bringing that in. They're gradually rolling out. But it's not going to be just all nice, positive conditioning. There's going to be some consequences when they start rolling this out all over. They're going to take the gloves off at that point. And we now have a major new voice that is slamming what the NSA is doing. Now, we've had senators, we've had NSA whistleblowers, and now we've got a new board which I'd never even heard of before. It's called the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. Now, one of the reasons you haven't heard of this probably is because they were created back in 2004. They were originally just dismissed as a propaganda arm of the Bush administration. But then they went through a reform in 2007, and what happened at that time was they got a little bit more independent. They were appointed by Senate confirmation. Still, they never met until November, this last November, 2013. Now, this is what they had to say. They said only minimal benefits in counterterrorism efforts have come from the bulk collection of phone call records, that it's illegal and it should be shut down. And they say it lacks a viable legal foundation under Section 215. That's Section 215 of the Patriot Act. See, it's not even authorized under the Patriot Act, as bad as the Patriot Act is. But they go on. They say it implicates constitutional concerns under the First and Fourth Amendments, raises serious threats to privacy and civil liberties as a policy matter, and has shown only limited value. As a result, the board recommends that the government end the program. How about that? Same recommendation that we have about that. It's clear to everyone that it's a violation of the First and Fourth Amendment. You have to have a search warrant. You have to have cause. We've had whistleblowers who have gone to the mat, and yet we still have people like Bill Gates and others who are saying that we need to trade off our privacy for security. Well, you'll never have security if you don't have privacy and freedom. And there's some people who understand this in the Ukraine. We see a lot of reports coming out of very violent revolution going on there, fighting in the streets. It looks like some kind of a post-apocalyptic scene. They've created their own versions of makeshift riot gear. Take a look at some of these things they've got here. Motorcycle helmets they're using, shields, clubs that they've made. They've even got slingshots, catapults, trebuchets. Both the police and the rioters are throwing Molotov cocktails at each other. And we've had hundreds of people injured on both sides. We've had at least 5 protesters killed. One has been allegedly killed by a police sniper. This is amazing. Why do these people want to get into the EU so bad? Well, the answer is that they don't necessarily want to get into the EU as badly as they want to get away from Russia. 2 generations ago, they suffered from something called the Holodomor. Now, this was actually a Soviet genocide in the Ukraine. This was talked about by a man named Raphael Lemkin, who actually coined the term genocide. And he used Stalin's genocide against the Ukraine as a definition of what genocide was, a perfect example of it. And he said the Soviet genocide in the Ukraine followed a 4-pronged attack. Now, here's the 4 prongs that they did, and look and see if this sounds familiar to what's going on in America today. Number 1, they took out the intellectual leadership. Number 2, they co-opted the churches. They said, you either become loyal to the Russian government or we're going to shut you down. The third thing they did was they destroyed the food supply, and that was the main way that they killed most of the people, was with a horrific famine in the Ukraine. And the last thing he did was he fragmented the Ukrainian people by adding to the Ukraine other people from outside the area. This is exactly what we see happening here. And if we don't want to see these kind of post-apocalyptic pictures happening here, we need to do everything we can to keep these kinds of scenes from happening in the U.S. Now, if it happens here, it's going to be something called democide, where the government kills the people. It's not going to be directed at any particular ethnic group or nationality. It'll be against everyone. So we all need to join to make sure this doesn't happen.
Symbols are powerful, and the globalists have hijacked the symbols of America. They've turned them into their own symbols. Well, we are restoring the idea of the true republic, not the counterfeit globalist empire, by promoting the icon George Washington and others. That's why we're rolling out an 100% made in America line of incredible pro-liberty apparel. We are repopularizing liberty. We are helping fellow Americans rediscover what made this country great. We are the spirit of 1776. We are 1776 worldwide. We are all brothers and sisters in arms in the animating contest of liberty, in the long march towards humanity's ultimate destiny of freedom. Visit madein1776.com today and vote with your dollars to promote truly made in America, high-quality products, and promote the ideals of liberty.